What is the worst thing? What is the worst part about bringing a lawsuit against a careless doctor and careless hospital staff? Would you like to know the answer? Come join me for a walk through the neighborhood as I share with you the answer to that question. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski. I'm a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. The worst thing about bringing a lawsuit against somebody whom you trusted, your doctor whom you loved, who you put your heart and soul into, who you trusted your life with, the worst part about that is two things, actually. Number one is the guilt associated with going ahead and starting a lawsuit against him. The second thing is not knowing what's going to happen. Those two things combined create the worst aspect, the worst part of going ahead and filing a lawsuit. Many people are confronted with the fact that here they are now troubled. They now have a conflict. What's the conflict? The conflict is they suffered significant harm and injury as a result of, they believe, a doctor's carelessness. After having your medical records reviewed by a qualified medical expert, who now determines that yes, your doctor and the hospital staff were careless, and as a result of their carelessness caused you significant harm and injury. Many people, many injured patients are now conflicted. Why are they conflicted? Because they trusted these doctors. They trusted the hospital staff. They expected that the doctor would do right by them and do everything possible to get them better. That's why they were going there, to get better, because they had a medical problem, they had a medical issue, and now they were going for treatment. They relied on these doctors. They relied on the hospital staff to do the right thing. And now, according to the medical experts who have reviewed your particular records, they determined that these doctors and the hospital staff violated the basic standards of medical care. As a result of that improper medical care and treatment, you suffered significant harm and injury. And that creates guilt. Why? Because you're going through your mind thinking, okay, I can't believe I may have to actually go ahead and sue the doctor who I loved. I would go to this doctor on a regular basis every single year. I would tell the doctor my most intimate problems, all because I trusted him. And now I'm going to go ahead and sue him? That's terrible. And many of these injured patients, these injured victims, are truly guilt-ridden with the fact that they are going to go ahead and now bring a lawsuit, or have no choice but to go ahead and file a lawsuit against their doctor or the hospital staff, or both. Why? In order to obtain some form of compensation, to obtain money as a form of compensation for all the harms and damages and losses they incurred because of the carelessness that occurred with your care. So guilt plays a huge part. And now when somebody says, listen, I feel so guilty about having to go ahead and sue the doctor or the hospital, I ask them a couple of questions. I turn around and I say, okay, imagine this scenario. You are 5 years down the road. It's now time for one of your kids to go to college. You have not been able to work for the past 5 years. Who's going to pay for your child's education? Let's say you are out of work and cannot and have not been able to work since the time of the wrongdoing. How are you going to support your kids? How are you going to support your family? How are you going to put food on your table? How are you going to pay your mortgage, your car expenses, any other expenses you have? I then say, you know what? As much as you're able to point out to the doctor all the things that were done wrong, I guarantee you that the doctor is, number one, not going to admit he did anything wrong. He's not going to admit that he violated the standard of care. And even if the doctor did say, okay, so I did something wrong, but guess what? Whatever I did didn't cause you harm and injury. So now the doctor's saying, even if I did something wrong, whatever I did didn't cause you injury. And then the doctor's going to turn around and say, you know what? Even if I did something wrong and I did cause you injury, guess what? Your injuries aren't as bad as you claim them to be. And then, to turn the screws even tighter, they're going to turn around and say, you know what? If I did something wrong and I caused you harm, guess what? You, Mr. or Mrs. Patient, you caused your own injuries and you contributed to your own injuries. So don't blame me for what occurred, and don't blame me for everything that occurred. Those are the typical defenses that we see in these medical malpractice cases. Now, as I continue asking these questions, the guilt begins to fade, and the injured patient begins to recognize that, you know what? It's true. I have to recognize that I have to stand up for myself. No one is going to provide for me and my family. And if a medical expert has confirmed that I have a valid case, then I actually have the ability and the right to go ahead and bring a lawsuit to try and obtain compensation, trying to obtain money as a form of compensation for all of the injuries that you suffered. The second component that I talked at the beginning of the video about the worst part about bringing a lawsuit is not knowing what's going to happen. When you start a case, in all likelihood, you've never brought a lawsuit before. You're not going to know the process about how an attorney evaluates your case. You're not going to know yet the process of what goes on after an attorney evaluates your case and after a medical expert has confirmed that you have a valid case. Not knowing what happens after your lawsuit gets started is a problem. Why? Because you just don't know. You won't know what goes on behind closed doors in the attorney's office when you leave and you go home. And now you spend months and months wondering what's going on in your attorney's office, what's going on with your case. You're not going to know about all the steps involved with the attorneys who represent the doctors and the hospitals having to now answer the allegations in your lawsuit. You're not yet going to know. Oh, wow, here we go. Look at this owl. Another owl. It's right here on the sidewalk. Oh my God, look at that. That is the coolest thing. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. That is wild. He's just hanging out. Look at that. Just happens to hang out. Wow. Hi, baby. And he's going flying off into his nest. That is so cool. So you're not going to know about all the steps that are involved that happens behind the scenes, about all the discovery and the documents and the medical records that have to be exchanged. You're not going to know about what's involved with a pretrial deposition. You're not going to know about what you have to prepare for in order to get ready for your pretrial deposition that lawyers also call an examination before trial. There's so many steps that go on in a lawsuit that you are probably and most likely not familiar with, that not knowing all this information creates a lot of anxiety in a number of people who are thinking about bringing a lawsuit. And that's one of the most troubling things because you don't know and you've never been exposed and you've never gone through this process before. So not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what the ultimate outcome is going to be, creates a big problem for a lot of people. And they are hesitant to take that step forward sometimes to say, hey, listen, I believe I have a right to bring a lawsuit, but I'm unsure, I'm hesitant, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know the process, and I don't know anybody that I can trust to explain the process to me. So that's one of the things that's going to prevent people from going forward and bringing a lawsuit. And sometimes all this waiting and anxiety creates paralysis. The injured victim doesn't take any action, and they simply try and push it off. And when they do finally realize, you know what, I have no choice but to investigate further, in that instance, they better hope that the time in which they have to file a case has not expired. And there are strict deadlines that are involved in these particular types of cases. So going back to the title I raised in the video, what are the two worst things that are concerning to injured patients, to injured victims, before they ever go ahead and bring a lawsuit? Number one, in my opinion, is guilt. The second thing is that they're not aware and they're not sure and they don't know what's going to happen. So how do you resolve that? You resolve it by talking to an experienced attorney who has gone through this, who's spent his career handling these types of cases, who can answer and allay those concerns and anxieties. Those concerns and anxieties are all valid. But once you do learn about what happens, once you do understand the step-by-step process, you begin to get more comfortable and you begin to recognize and realize, okay, now I understand what I need to do. Now I recognize I'm doing this for myself and my family. And now I have an obligation to them, to myself and to my family, to move forward to see whether or not we have a valid case, and if so, to proceed forward. So why do I share this quick information with you? I share it with you to open your eyes, to help you understand how these types of cases work in the state of New York. You know, I recognize you're likely watching this because you want to see the beautiful owls that I encounter in the middle of the walkway. No. I realize you're watching this because you wanted to learn about how these types of cases work, and in all likelihood, you have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York, and you are thinking about bringing a lawsuit, but have not done so yet, because you still have questions that need to be answered, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know, I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to chat with you. You can reach me at 516-487-8255. 8207, or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. That's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a fantastic day.